Hello. We are on week 3 of our Empowered Women Circle, and I am so glad to have you here. I really hope you've seen week 1 and week 2, but if you haven't, you can still get a lot from this, and then you can go back and do that at your convenience. So we are taking bite-sized pieces, and I'm going to share my screen so you'll be able to see my slides. We're going to walk through some really valuable tips and tricks for your overall wellness this week. We're the Empowered Women's Circle, here to strengthen your body, elevate your mind, and nurture your soul. Above all, nurture your soul. And I've already had some feedback that the nurturing your soul part has been one of the most important parts of our circle. Welcome to our circle. I have to go through this legal stuff. You're going to get sick of it, but eventually it'll drop off when you all get the point. The contents of this presentation are for informational purposes only. If you have any concerns with a health or mental health condition, you absolutely have to see your own healthcare provider. And I know that you understand that, but it's important to review. So we have a homepage. It's right here. And essentially, we want you to go through those 4 steps if you haven't already. There's a 40-minute video, and there's 4 10-minute video segments if you prefer. Whichever way you prefer, it's exactly the same content. But we want you to know who we are. We want you to get on the same page with us, and those 4 steps are the way to do that. We are here as a cohesive group of wellness leaders bringing to you some really great information, but also hoping that we have created an Empowered Women's Circle. And so as part of that, we have shared agreements that we are going to show up fully in our power and participate, that if we have questions or concerns that go beyond what we discuss here, that we'll utilize resources that are readily available and that we will make available if you have any questions. We share resources and generate support for each other. We take inspired action each week, and we know that ultimately we are able to elevate each other if we bring our best to the group. And that's the most exciting part about this Empowered Women's Circle. And we maintain confidentiality. We're an inclusive group. We extend acceptance, love, and support to anyone who shows up fully. And we are so happy to have you here. So we're talking today about a few more steps in shifting power. We talked a lot about a feminine approach to power and a masculine approach to power, and essentially a feminine approach to power being free-flowing, open, flexible, we're compassionate, we're connected. We as women have our own inherent traits that most of us naturally have, but often we have shifted that to a masculine approach in order to fit into this masculine world. In order to actually step into an empowered woman, an empowered approach to life, we need to really be creating from the inside out. And we talked about that already. Really knowing yourself, really getting in touch with yourself, really sensing into those deeper yearnings. And it's hard for me to explain when we start to have that awakening inside, those deeper yearnings that become so essential to realize, to self-actualize. It can be at any time in a woman's life, at any age or stage. And so sometimes it can be just after getting married, or just after having a baby, or it can be, for example, it can be when a woman ultimately becomes a mom, and she is no longer just a woman, but now she realizes she's losing herself in some process or some stage of life. And that inner yearning becomes prevalent, and it becomes almost impossible to push it down any longer. Now, when that starts to happen, we realize that there's something deeper, that there's something bigger. And a lot of times this can happen around the menopausal transition as well. And so although we don't always know when that starts to happen, we know that it is happening for a lot of women and in a lot of women that I work with. And therefore it becomes important for us to start to share, to engage, to become part of this cohesive circle or a cohesive circle, and really reach out into community in order to figure out what it is that we as women need in order to feel fully fulfilled. So last week, I'll bring my video back up here a little bit for you. So last week, we were talking about aligning with your power. So women step into sometimes this sense of victimization, this, life is happening to me and there's nothing I can do about it. And sometimes that may be the case, but most of the time we're creating our life. And if we are really truly wanting to transform, self-actualize, realize our fullest potential, it's time to step into our power and out of our victimization. Stop feeling like things are being thrown at us that we can't control, but really step up and become the woman that we have inside of us that we know that we are. And that's what we're here to do together. So don't worry if you haven't got it right or haven't got it figured out. You know, it's a work in progress for all of us, and that's what we're here to do together. So there is no wrong place to be at this point, but just understanding that we're stepping out of victimization and into the power to actually set the path for our life. We need to take responsibility for our life and responsibility for getting our needs fulfilled. And last week, I asked you to answer these 3 questions. What do you want to create? What do you need in order to create it? And what are you tolerating? We're going to this week go very deeply into what do you want to create, but stop. If you're already writing a list down and you're already putting things on paper, like I want to create, you know, this amazing business or this incredibly intimately connected relationship with my partner, or I want to be a conscious parent. Stop writing down the tasks, the to-dos, the driven, productive actions. We're not going to do that yet, because we're stepping into a feminine creation. We're stepping into creating from the inside out. So it's not going to come from a piece of paper or from a to-do list. It's going to be a new process for you. And that's what I'm explaining to you this week. And it's complicated and a work in progress. And so again, don't worry if you don't get it right away. In fact, you're not going to get it right away. I don't even have it perfect. And I've been working on this for several years. But it's about observing what has been limiting you in your life until now. So you're in a pattern, you're in a cycle, something's happening in your life that maybe you feel an inner yearning to change. But you're not going to be able to truly change it in a lasting, permanent way until you step into an observer place where you're watching your life and you're actually observing almost objectively what has been limiting you until now. It's like watching yourself in a movie, for example. You want to develop a new relationship with yourself and with the world. So start thinking about what you want to create, but we're going to think about it from the perspective of what's been stopping us from getting it so far. So before we start creating, we want to determine the underlying assumptions about what life has for us. So if you're thinking about a specific area of your life, what are your underlying assumptions that you may not have ever actually considered? So if you're thinking about getting into a romantic relationship, you can't find a life partner or a love partner, or you're in a relationship that's not going anywhere, and you're thinking to yourself, well, there's just nobody out there for me. Or there's relationships, but there's no such thing as equality in relationships. There's no such thing as a deeply, intimately bonded relationship that lasts for very long, because I've been in and out of relationships and that just isn't there for me in this life. Or I'm always going to be alone. I'm a professional woman and I'm always going to be alone. There's nobody that can actually meet me where I am. So that's a relationship example. That might not be your area of attention or focus, but that's just an example. So determine what are those assumptions about what life has for you, about your capacity to fulfill on what you're trying to create in that area of life. What is your underlying belief system in that area of your life? And we talked about during this initial 12 weeks, at least during our Empowered Women Circle, that we're going to be creating in a specific area of life. And I did ask you to get a journal, and hopefully you've made some entries. And now's the time to really start thinking about focusing on that area that you feel is ready and most in need of a transformation. So we have beliefs that we form at a really young age, prior to our ability to actually question those beliefs that we're forming about ourselves. And those beliefs create sort of a context or a perspective or a looking glass. And I do have articles and blogs on my website that you can read, and there's some elaboration on some of these concepts. But essentially, at a very young age, you start to see yourself as others see you. So, for example, young girls, we know, they look to others for others' body language as to how they really feel about themselves. So if others see them as, oh, you're so cute and you're so pretty and you're so good at dancing and you're so good at playing piano, then we start to think, oh, I'm good at those things and I'm pretty and I'm sweet. And we internalize what others see about us. But we also start to look at other things that are being reflected back at us, like mommy and daddy are so busy, they don't have time for me. So maybe I'm not important. Or mommy and daddy talk a lot about us not having a lot of money. And so there's probably not a lot of money for me in this world, and I'm really never going to have that. And so we create for ourselves a perspective on what's possible, on what capacity is available to us in this life. And those underlying beliefs have meaning, and they create meaning about us, meaning that we generally internalize about ourselves. And so a lot of us have done a lot of work in those areas, and we continue to develop and evolve in those areas. But having insight into those underlying beliefs that we've created, and that perspective that we bring to everything we do, is absolutely essential in this process. So the belief that we have now created about ourselves, whether it be at a young age, which is usually the case, or later, maybe we've questioned it and we've got a new belief, which is more positive and more productive. Either way, that belief becomes reinforced in our daily life. So the things that we bring to life and the actions that we take into life are reflected back at us, and it becomes a circle. So, and I'll get back to that in a second, but where do you want to focus? So you can identify an area of your life that needs transformation, and only you can decide that. That's not something anyone else can figure out. Truly from the inside, as you sit with yourself thinking about, what is it that I want to work on or up level or become more empowered about? And we can figure that out by feeling where you have strong, usually negative emotion. It can be positive, but usually negative emotion. And this is why a perfect storm or a whole pile of bad things happening to us at once can trigger that inside feeling that something in my life has to change. So, for example, something happens at work and there's, say, a bunch of layoffs happening at work and there's no job security and there's a whole pile of emotion around that. And then suddenly there becomes this inner voice, this inner yearning that starts to say, or a whisper from somewhere that starts to say, things aren't right. This job isn't for me. I'm not fulfilled here. I'm undervalued here. I feel this isn't the right place for me to be. And things like that happen in life where there's a perfect storm of events and then an inner, almost a ringing out of, it's time to make some serious changes. And whether or not you've ever had that, you probably have heard of people who have, and to be on the lookout now. We don't all need a perfect storm, but I'm just trying to explain how that can sometimes trigger this inner sense that that something needs to happen. So you're a survivor. You came to this earth to be a survivor, and you have developed a false belief about yourself or your life, and it keeps you rooted in a pattern in a lot of cases. It keeps you rooted in a pattern until you're able to work on it and provide insight and get out of that pattern. And it's because it's a survival mechanism. So the example that I used, for example, about a child and the parents reflecting back on that child. So for example, if a child gets a lot of affection and attention from mommy and daddy because she does really well on tests, or she does really well in school, or she does really well at her extracurricular activities, and that's when she gets her attention from mommy and daddy, which is often the case in our society, then she internalizes, well, mommy and daddy are going to love me if I do really well at something, so I'm not going to fail. Or she brings home a failing grade, or she does really awful at something, and she doesn't get that same reinforcing attention. So what is that saying to that little girl? As an example, it's saying to her that when I do things really well, then I get the attention and I get the protection, and I need my mom and dad to survive, so that's really important for me. But if I do things really poorly, I don't get that attention, I don't have that protection, and possibly my very survival is at risk. And we know that's the case for tiny babies and for young children. And it becomes rooted in how we live our life. And so that little girl may realize, well, there's no sense in trying something that I might fail at, because that puts me at risk. That puts my affection and attention from the people I count on at risk. And so why would I reach out and try something that I'm not sure I can succeed at if it puts my very survival at risk? And so that little girl becomes not a risk taker. She becomes very cautious and very careful about what she does. And I have explained this a little bit in some of my writing, but we know that we do that to little girls a lot more than we do to little boys, for example. And society seems to value risk taking and courage and bravery and being rough and tumble. It seems to value that in boys more and reinforce that. So that becomes the reinforcing cycle more often for little boys. So that, again, this isn't about gender, but just to give you some examples about how we become rooted in our patterns at a very, very young age. But now, as we sit here, it's true in a lot of cases that that is no longer serving you. And that underlying belief that you have created about what is there for you in life, what is available to you, what your capacities are, they're no longer needed. And we need to bring those to the surface. We need to have insight into them. We need to question them. Then we need to root into what is actually true now as we sit here as adult women empowered to live our very best life. So be aware of what you're taught. Your underlying belief systems run deep. They create within you, within your mind, thoughts about yourself and what's available to you. The thoughts lead to emotion, and that is sometimes even just a neurologic process in our nervous system that we often don't have control about. We think something, and then we have an emotion related to it, and that ultimately leads to an action. And I'll give you a tiny example here that I will sometimes use. My son is a little bit of an uptight personality. He's a brilliant little boy, but he really doesn't like to be upset about things. Things really bother him sometimes. And one day he's sitting in the back of the van and he said to me, "Mommy, we're on our way to soccer, and I don't want you to tell me that we're late. In fact, tell me that we're on time, even if we're late." These are his words. "Tell me that we're on time, even if we're late. Because if you tell me that we're late, I'm going to feel really upset and stressed and anxious. And then I might get angry. And if I get angry, then I might yell at you, and things aren't going to go well." And he actually said almost that entire conversation that I just reiterated. So he had the insight to know that his thoughts about being late would trigger his emotions, which would trigger his actions. And guess what he also knew? He knew that his action, for example, getting angry at me, yelling at me, would have a reflected reaction from Mommy. He also knew that part. And so he realized that he needed to stop that pathway before it even got started. And so a lot of insight there from my little boy, and a really good example of how thoughts lead to emotions, which lead to actions, which therefore reinforce what is going on in our mind. So what or how are you reinforcing your underlying beliefs? So difficult concept, but something for you to sit with this week. So our weekly goals are to answer that question: how are you reinforcing your underlying beliefs? So what are they? How did they form? How are you reinforcing them? I don't expect you to figure this all out. You're not your own psychologist, but I do want you to sit with that question. But how could my beliefs be creating certain thoughts, which are creating emotions, which are ultimately creating my actions in a lot of situations, and those actions create reaction, which is essentially the reality of the world that I'm sitting in. And we'll dig into that a bit more, but I'd like you to work on that question. So complete the 4 steps outlined on the homepage, return weekly, and check your inbox for the recorded session that's going to guide you, like this one. And as wellness leaders, we have highly recommended that you go to do your ID Life Health Assessment. It's all free. It's going to give you about a 10-page health report that's got incredible wellness information on there to guide your health and your physical aspects of this path that we're on together. So Marcia suggested and reinforced that over the last couple of weeks. And if you haven't done so, our websites are on this homepage, and I'm available on my website, on my email anytime, in order to be able to guide you about how to get on that comprehensive nutrition program that is the #1 first step for replacing nutrient deficiencies. So from Marcia this week, Marcia is our certified personal trainer and nutrition coach. She says this week, do your ID Life Health Assessment and get on your customized nutrition plan as the very first step. But in regard to additional nutrition, last session we talked about filling deficits by eating the rainbow. And we talked about getting more vegetables and fruits daily, or at least once in the week. This week, Marcia is encouraging us to do the same, but with a very colorful twist. So different vegetables and fruits have different nutrients. So if you're in a rut eating the same 3 vegetables every week, your body isn't getting the variety of nutrients that it needs. And I'll just back up what Marcia is saying here, because we make our children try vegetables. Every time one is served, we make them try it. And at least I know they're taking a bite or 2 of something they wouldn't otherwise get. And that's essential for their variety of their nutritional intake. But your challenge this week is to try something colorful and new. So something new. Marcia lets her daughter go to the grocery store with her and pick out anything that looks bright and colorful. Then she goes to a recipe on the internet and makes that recipe. Sometimes it turns out great, sometimes it doesn't. I'll say Marcia, same in our house. But she has found some interesting new recipes that have turned out really, really yummy. And she suggests one, which I will post the recipe link online. We don't want to plagiarize anybody, so we'll give you the direct link. She suggests that the recipe that she suggests is a roasted shrimp and veggie salad. So I'm going to make sure you have the link for that, and you can just also Google roasted shrimp and veggie salad, and you'll probably find some really yummy recipes that will include a lot of colors. In addition, Marcia is continuing to guide us. So from our last week of movement, she had us work on 15 minutes at least once in the week. She encouraged us with some really interesting ideas how to have fun with that. So continue doing that for sure. And you may be wanting to stick to that. We don't want anybody to get hurt or do more than they can handle. But if you're ready for more, I will post this direct link as well. This is Jennifer Widerstrom's full body superset workout. This workout requires no equipment and is a series of 5 supersets, each one being a hold immediately followed by a movement. So if you do the hold for about 30 seconds, and then the movement for about 30 seconds, and then rest for 30 seconds, don't forget rest is really important, before moving on to the next superset. So that's 30 seconds movement, 30 seconds hold, always hold first. So 30 seconds hold, 30 seconds movement, 30 seconds rest, and then go on to the next set. Repeat the entire cycle twice. So Jennifer in this set is giving us 5 of them. So you're going to do the 5 of them and you're going to repeat the 5 of them again. That totals 15 minutes. So you're getting your 15-minute workout that we recommend, but you're getting it in a whole new way with all new muscles in your body. So we will be doing this workout together in our in-person meeting. And at this point, I'd like to recommend that you watch for details for the date and location of our next live Empowered Women's Circle. That'll go directly to your inbox. And from April, our holistic life coach, in our last week, April shares oh, this is our last week of the 3-week cycle here. April shares one more tip on battling exhaustion. So she suggests balancing our schedules and knowing our limits. So especially as women, we overbook ourselves. We have trouble saying no. I'm laughing because, of course, we are all like that. We can alleviate some of the chronic exhaustion we experience by recognizing the boundaries we set and knowing our limits. So you were asked a question last week, what are you tolerating? And one of the things you may be tolerating is overbooking your schedule for other people, and start thinking about those things. April says some people achieve this by having a calendar they block off certain times for different activities and different commitments, or only allowing certain numbers of commitments each week or each month. So whatever fits your lifestyle, important thing is to know your limits, set boundaries, and live a balanced life of work and play. And we in this Empowered Women Circle are here to continue to support each other and you in living that balance of work and play. So on the slide, you'll see here, self-care is key, just like last week and every week. Block time for yourself. You are important too. And if nobody's telling you that, I am now telling you that you are essential. Put on your own oxygen mask first, like they tell you in the airplane. Look after yourself first, and you'll be a whole lot better at looking after everyone else that's counting on you. Now go do it. Like right now. Like go block some time on your calendar. Okay, right now, open your calendar. Go block some time for you. Nobody has to know what you're doing in that block. Just block it for yourself. Let your light shine, and until next week, we will see you and see your radiance shine. We're the Empowered Women's Circle. If you have any trouble getting back to our homepage, I've put the link here, drcatherinehanson.com/circle. And please watch your inbox. I hope the emails aren't going to your junk or trash folder, but I'm definitely emailing you, and I want to make sure you're getting those emails with upcoming dates, upcoming video recordings, upcoming live in-person events, and other special things we're doing. So check your inbox. Bye-bye for now.